WPLG 715, Fireman Kenny's on the air, helping you to stay safe in a world where danger never takes a vacation. On this episode of the Fireman Kenny Show podcast, we interview Milwaukee Fire Department Captain Mike Thurow about National Carbon Monoxide Awareness Month. Welcome back to all 12 of our loyal listeners to another installment of the Fireman Kenny Show podcast. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the Fireman Kenny Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or whatever platform you're listening to the show. The National Carbon Monoxide Awareness Association has declared November as National Carbon Monoxide Awareness Month. On this episode, we talk with Captain Mike Thurow from the Milwaukee Fire Department Hazardous Materials Team about carbon monoxide awareness. Before we begin the podcast, we would like to mention our sponsors. For over a century, the National Fire Sprinkler Association has been advocating for a stronger industry and a safer world by promoting fire sprinklers in model codes and legislation. Their mission is simple: to protect lives and property from fire through the widespread acceptance of the fire sprinkler concept. Be sure to follow the National Fire Sprinkler Association on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. You can visit the National Fire Sprinkler Association website, www.nfsa.org. We would also like to thank our friends at Fire Suppression Solutions, distributor of fire suppression products for the fire service and for home use. You can follow Fire Suppression Solutions on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Now a word from Fire Suppression Solutions.
Fire can strike without warning, leaving you with precious little time to react. And if you are not prepared, the damage can be devastating to life and property. In the blink of an eye, your home or business could be on fire, with flames doubling in size every 30 seconds, leaving you helpless and unable to respond. Don't let this nightmare become a reality. That starts with being prepared. Our fire suppression products are designed to equip you with an effective response to any fire emergency, all while limiting additional damage, making you the true first responder, giving you the peace of mind that you have what you need to keep your loved ones and property safe until more help comes. Do you have a plan to respond to a fire emergency at your home or business? Protect your family, pets, and property with the tools from Fire Suppression Solutions. Contact us today and finish putting your plan into effect before it's too late.
For more information on Fire Suppression Solutions products, you can visit firess.us. Welcome back to all 12 of our loyal listeners to another installment of the Fireman Kenny Show podcast. The National Carbon Monoxide Awareness Association has declared November as National Carbon Monoxide Awareness Month. With us today is Captain Mike Thurow from the Milwaukee Fire Department Hazmat Team. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kenny, thank you so much for having me today. As you said, I'm with the Milwaukee Fire Department. I've been with them for the past 12 years. Actually, my anniversary date was just 10/14/13. Tog the Raz one, if you know, you know. I have caught the hazmat bug probably about 5 years ago. Been a hazmat technician now since 2019. Assisted with being the assistant director of the hazmat team for a few years. Recently took over the team about 3 years ago and been running ever since.
You also have some side gigs that you do a lot of hazmat training for. So you're working for Emergency Response Specialists, or ERS, and as well as Ralph Gallo and Associates. Why don't you talk about your time with those organizations and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So once you start working in the hazmat world, the best way to actually get good at hazmat is doing it all the time, whether that be teaching, training, working with meters. So I had a mentor of mine, Russ Rivard, you might know. He directed me I should teach. I was terrified. He set me up with Ralph, and I started teaching at Molson Coors Miller, their hazmat team, which is a great group of first responders that work at Miller that also double up as hazmat technicians if something goes wrong there. Once I started working with them, got a name for myself, got approached by emergency response specialists to work more specifically with first responders around the state of Wisconsin, which is terrific. So I try to prioritize that when I'm working with emergency response specialists. And in addition to that, I also teach at Whammer.
So, Mike, since the National Carbon Monoxide Awareness Association has declared November as National Carbon Monoxide Awareness Month, a lot of our listeners may not even know what carbon monoxide is. So what is carbon monoxide and how is it produced?
Yeah, carbon monoxide is a colorless, odorless, toxic gas. It's produced anytime there's incomplete combustion, so car engine running, stovetop, water heater that's gas powered. Any of those things all will produce some amount of carbon monoxide. The important thing is to make sure that we know how much is produced and make sure you don't have a lethal amount.
So for the people who are really interested in chemistry and hazmat, let's talk about what actually makes the carbon and the oxygen atoms kind of stick together. How does that whole thing work?
Yeah, absolutely, Kenny. So we have a triple covalent bond with carbon monoxide. Okay, it sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo. The important thing is what that means. It means it's a very stable molecule, so once it gets in your body, it stays there for a very long time. That's what makes it a chemical asphyxiant and so dangerous to people.
So let's talk about the molecular weight. So would you say that carbon monoxide is about the same weight as air?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. It's slightly lighter than air. And why that matters, again, for first responders, it's where you're going to meter. Where does this stuff accumulate in a home? So when you walk in, you get a call for a CO run, you check that first floor, got 0 parts per million, awesome. It does not mean you're done. Over time, it's going to migrate upwards. So you have to check those upper floors to make sure that there's not a pooling of carbon monoxide upstairs. That's why we prioritize molecular weight when we're looking at hazmat, is to really figure out where it goes and how our meters interact with that chemical.
So let's talk about carbon monoxide, which is CO, versus carbon dioxide, CO2. And you often get a lot of the dispatchers who say, oh, a CO2 meter went off. Let's give a little brief explanation of the differences between carbon monoxide, CO, and carbon dioxide, CO2.
I love that you just put it just to dispatchers. I think a lot of firefighters also get confused. It's a hard one. Carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, it changes a little bit. The difference between the two. Carbon dioxide, okay, natural occurrence after respiration, is actually a simple asphyxiant. What it's going to do is it's going to displace the oxygen in the room that you're in. So I can't get oxygen, bad day for me. I do not like it. Okay, carbon monoxide bonds more readily to our hemoglobin, and that actually makes it a chemical asphyxiant. There could be enough oxygen in the room. My dumb body is going to take up the CO over the oxygen.
So that's a really great point, Mike, about CO2 versus CO and how one is just starving you of oxygen and then how CO actually sticks to the hemoglobin in the red blood cells and starves your body of oxygen at the cellular level. So let's talk about what happens when carbon monoxide enters the body.
Yeah, so when carbon monoxide enters the body, it ends up started doing something called bioaccumulation. It sits in there, takes more and more red blood cells, it gets into that hemoglobin, sticks to it, and then as you're breathing, you're not actually transporting oxygen anymore to the rest of your body, you're transporting that CO. So you have all the same effects as if you had no oxygen in that room. You're going to start having headaches, you could possibly go unconscious, dizziness, nausea, collapsing, all those telltale signs that you're not getting oxygen start to occur.
Yeah, we should tell all of our listeners and especially our paramedics and our nurses out there that carbon monoxide has a 200 times greater affinity to the hemoglobin in our red blood cells than oxygen does. So again, you're not getting the offloading of the oxygen at the cells and basically starving at the cellular level.
Yeah, and it's those things that happen really quickly on scene too. Actually in Milwaukee, we started adding CO monitors to all of our EMS kits. We had a close call. People come in for a headache, EMS call, don't think much of it. The guy's acting kind of goofy. They think, oh, maybe a diabetic. They pull out the glucometer, and all of a sudden the cub can't figure out how to make the glucometer work. Senior guy gives him a hard time, like, what are you doing? You've never used this thing before? He's like, no, I can do it. Passes it to the senior firefighter. He starts having trouble with it. Luckily, there was a heads-up boss that realized something was wrong. Both firefighters normally know how to operate this device, so they got everybody out into fresh air, which is the best thing you can do, and they found out they actually had a CO leak in the home that was causing all the medical conditions.
So, Mike, we talked about how carbon monoxide exists in a home, but a lot of our listeners may not know what the sources of carbon monoxide might be. So what are the sources of carbon monoxide in a home?
Yeah, absolutely. You have stoves, gas stoves can produce carbon monoxide. Again, that incomplete combustion. This is why we always tell people, please do not try to heat your home with a stove. If you have that turned up, the higher the burner is going, the more CO can be pushed off by the device. If it's running long time, it can get dirty over time, pushing off a lot of CO. You have ovens can produce CO, same thing. Boilers, furnaces. Actually, furnaces is an interesting one. So before I was even a firefighter, I was an apartment manager, and we had our furnace go out. So I had to tell my residents, hey, we're going to get some space heaters. We're keeping you warm. They're electric. They're plug-in as we get this furnace serviced. Won't go into details about the owner of the apartment. They decided they could find someone real cheap to service the furnace. They got it in very quickly. Unfortunately, the next day, our CO alarm started going off. Anytime you have an inappropriately installed furnace that's not venting properly, you can reintroduce CO into the home. Incredibly dangerous. So really, whenever you have a furnace service, make sure it's an authorized technician that knows what they're doing. They got to know the ins and outs of that furnace and make sure you're good before they leave. Other places that can put them off, fireplaces, clothes dryers, attached garages. If you run your car in the winter, I know I've been guilty of it. If it's in your garage, though, it's going to migrate back into that home with you. That's why I always say any kind of device that can put off some kind of CO, you want to keep it at least 20 feet away from the home at all times. So I live in Mequon. We're recording here in Mequon. I'm a great old farmhouse, 1890 build. Very fortunate to sneak into this neck of the woods. About once a year, I lose power to my house, just nature of the drop line. So I have a generator, which helps me keep my chest freezer going. It's great. I got to make sure it's 20 feet away. Anytime it's too close to any open window on my house, it can put CO into the structure. So it's really important, keep it far away. Actually, one of the worst CO runs I ever was on a generator run. It was in Milwaukee. I think it was my Cub year. But this time, I've only ever bump tested my CO. It never went off on any runs. We end up going out for a possible CO run. It's super, super cold. Power's been out through most of the city. We walk into this apartment building and you hear a hum. That's kind of a weird thing. And all of a sudden, my CO alarm jumps to 800 parts per million. Again, we didn't get into it yet, but the ideal age of CO is 1,200 parts per million. So I am right there at immediately dangerous to life and health, just entering the door. What ended up happening is they lost power. The owner of the structure thought it'd be a good idea to put generators on every floor, every balcony, and run them. He started them at 8 at night when everyone went to bed, and we got there about midnight. So we were pretty terrified as we were breaking doors, making sure we got people out, that we'd have people passed away, because that is a horrible level of CO. But again, he's trying to do a good thing, really cold, want to get heat. Unfortunately, not far enough away from the structure, not ventilated properly. It's a really big risk.
Yeah, so speaking of the generators as well, so with the flooding this summer, and we had a lot of flooding in West Bend, and one of the lieutenants had sent me a picture of a run they were on a couple days after, because the restoration company had showed up. They were running a generator too close to the house.
Absolutely.
And they said that they pulled up. The lady who owned the house came out running and said, Fireman Kenny just put in these a couple of years ago. So the carbon monoxide alarms I had installed were going off, all because that generator for the restoration company was running a little bit too close to the house. So that's something that everybody has to keep in mind when they're running their generator. It should be at least 20 feet away.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that people miss all the time, really well-intentioned, can have really bad consequences if you're not looking for this colorless, tasteless gas that can do damage.
So you brought up a little bit with the call where the firefighters couldn't work the glucometer because of the carbon monoxide. So let's talk about some of the effects of carbon monoxide poisoning.
Absolutely. Every time that people get carbon monoxide poisoning, again, it's basically an asphyxiant exposure. It's a chemical asphyxiant, but same thing happens. You end up getting dizzy. You have headaches, loss of coordination. You could be more irritable than normal. If it's really, really high concentrations, you can just go unconscious. So these are all telltale signs that there's a CO leak somewhere in the house.
And then you also have chronic poisoning. So the president of the National Carbon Monoxide Awareness Association, Sharon McNabb, is famous for going on the circuit and talking about a long-term exposure. So what are some of the symptoms of chronic CO poisoning?
Yeah, so chronic, you normally feel better when you're not at the site of the leak. You have mood changes, you have reoccurring unexplained illnesses, heart, lung, and brain damage, and it can interfere with your normal body operations. Okay, people always think about those high numbers like my 800 parts per million run. Something as low as 20 parts per million, that's continuous, that you're constantly breathing, starts to build up in the body and has these long-term effects that need to be treated actually by hyperbaric chamber. So it's important that you pay attention to those.
So, Mike, with the Fireman Kenny Show, we spend a lot of time dealing with statistics, so our community risk reduction professionals can use these and go out and do their presentation and make a case for the urgency of National Carbon Monoxide Awareness Month and carbon monoxide poisoning. So the National Carbon Monoxide Awareness Association has a number of statistics dealing with CO. Why don't we talk about those statistics?
Emergency rooms see 100,000 plus visits each year just due to carbon monoxide poisoning. We have 14,000 people are hospitalized annually from CO poisoning, many with lasting injuries. Fortunately, 1,200 people die each year from CO poisoning, and the number is rising in the U.S. 64% of non-fatal CO poisonings happen in the home and cause long-term health effects. Again, people think they're safe at home, and if they don't have those meters, let them know. It really can be traumatic for people. 85% of residents believe that carbon monoxide alarms will alarm at any level. That's not the case. At extremely low levels, which still can be harmful, like we talked about, they accumulate, they won't go off. So it's important to make sure that you pay attention to your symptoms, pay attention to all your burners. If you see signs of soots, things that aren't burning properly, get it serviced by a technician.
So, Mike, the National Carbon Monoxide Awareness Association has a number of prevention strategies to prevent CO in the home. Let's talk about some of those prevention strategies.
Absolutely. It's really important to make sure that you have your appliances such as furnace and water heaters inspected annually, again, by a certified technician. Ensure a carbon monoxide alarm is placed near each bedroom. Look for signs of a carbon monoxide leak, like we talked about before, such as soot, black residue on appliances or above the fireplace. All are telltale signs that you have incomplete combustion and CO seeping into your house. Replace your carbon monoxide alarm every 5 to 7 years. I know this is irritating. I know homeowners hate this. But the important thing is to understand why we're doing it. Okay, it's a big thing when I do any of my teaching is going into the why of things. So I'm going to get nerdy with you for a minute. Okay, the way these work, it's called an electrochemical sensor. Okay, so what they do is you have this sensor inside the alarm. Okay, the sensor has a topping on it. It's going to be kind of scientific term, schmutz. Okay, there's some schmutz on top of the sensor. Okay, as soon as the carbon monoxide comes in contact with that schmutz, it makes a chemical reaction that changes the resistance inside that meter, sending an electric signal to the meter saying how many parts per million are present in the home with you. Okay, the more activated that schmutz gets, the less responsive it becomes to that carbon monoxide. So over time, it's working properly. It's doing a great job. 5 to 7 year mark, it's kind of exhausted all that chemical reaction. It won't be as responsive to you, and you won't get accurate readings. That's why I change them out every 5 to 7 years or whatever the recommendation is by the manufacturer. Use your generators at least 20 feet away from any building, any opening in your home. Make sure it's properly ventilated. Turn off your car in the garage. When you have an attached garage, again, you're just asking for CO to pull into the structure every time you leave that thing running. I know it's convenient. I know we get cold in Wisconsin. You got to move it away from the house. You can't leave it on in the garage there. Don't rely exclusively on carbon monoxide alarms alone because, again, those lingering leaks under 30 parts per million, it'll never alarm. It's designed to let you know if you have an acute condition in your home. But if you have a chronic condition in your home, you won't know. So anytime you have lingering symptoms, you start having that feeling like, I just don't want to be home. This weird feelings about being by your stove. I get every time I cook, but that's different. You want to make sure you get a different way to look to see if you have carbon monoxide entering the structure.
Yeah, one of the things that I always did when I was doing the smoke alarm installs at the West Bend Fire Department, and I always recommended a plug-in model with a battery backup and a digital display, just because, again, they don't activate till that 30 parts per million. So if you happen to see 3, 4, 5, and there's the peak level button on those monitors as well. So you're going to want to look at those every once in a while to see if you have a small leak that's not activating that CO alarm.
Absolutely. That's a great recommendation. And again, having it plugged in is terrific. Again, the worst thing you want to do is have a meter that works perfectly and have the batteries die on you. That's a horrible feeling. So yeah, having the plug-in models are terrific. Make sure they're on every floor of the structure. In Wisconsin, another thing to keep in mind of is we have snow accumulation. Not as much as we used to have, but we still get snow in Wisconsin. Okay? Any vent from the house, if that gets blocked with snow, it's going to push the CO. It's going to go the path of least resistance, which means back into the home. So you got to make sure all those vents are cleared and no snow accumulates in those vent spaces. As with any hazmat scene, you want to stay uphill, upwind of wherever the leak is. Okay? You don't want to be inside of it trying to figure out what's going on. Because again, all those effects of CO start happening, confusion, headaches, it makes everything way worse. So stay uphill, upwind anytime you're dealing with a hazmat scene.
All right, so now we've done the prevention messages. What can someone do if they suspect carbon monoxide poisoning in their home?
Anytime you suspect carbon monoxide poisoning in your home, it is an emergency. you need to leave the home and dial 911. We want to make sure we get the fire department over there quickly with a meter to check if they have CO in the home. They're going to use a calibrated electrochemical sensor, very similar to the one you have in your home, just it has a higher range. So go down to that 0 parts per million, where you want to be, all the way up to a high end of 1,000 parts per million, and clear your whole structure for you so you can feel safe that you're okay at home. You want to make sure you do not return inside until you're given the all clear by emergency personnel or certified contractors you have coming out to fix whatever the problem was to begin with. Don't use faulty or improperly vented appliances until they've been serviced appropriately. And after an exposure, know that your cognitive abilities may be impaired. Have someone immediately drive you to the nearest medical facility so they can test for carbon monoxide poisoning. Like we talked about before, it does accumulate in the body, and we want to make sure we get a baseline level of where you're at and what we need to do to get you healthy.
So, Mike, we've talked about carbon monoxide poisoning in the home. Let's talk about where people wouldn't expect to find carbon monoxide. So let's say on a boat. So over the summer, back in July, a girl was killed from carbon monoxide while boating in Lincoln County. Let's talk about how we can avoid carbon monoxide in some of those non-traditional spaces like boats.
Yeah, that's one of those things you wouldn't think. Open air, you have all the ventilation in the world. Carbon monoxide poisoning would be one of the last things on your mind. But again, like we talked about earlier, anytime you have incomplete combustion, you can put off carbon monoxide. And you get stuck on a boat, especially even with those sidewalls, it can start pooling in that structure, and then that could affect vulnerable populations. I think this girl was 11 years old, again, younger. It happened anywhere. So things got to make sure you service all your motors, make sure they're ventilating properly. Make sure that if you don't have good airflow, you can find good airflow if you're going to run these things. It's really important to realize anytime there's incomplete combustion, there's going to be CO. So it's around us a lot. It's important to make sure that we just monitor how much we actually have with us and change the conditions if we start pooling up on there. So having a CO monitor on a boat seems crazy. It's not crazy. Throw something on there. Any place that you're going to be stuck, especially open waterway, with a potential producer of carbon monoxide, it's really important to make sure you're just metering for that. And that's an easy thing you can do. Just get a meter, know how many parts per million you have, know if you're safe or not.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike, about bringing carbon monoxide alarms with you on a boat or other places. So let's talk about the number of people who get killed by carbon monoxide when they're on vacation. So would you make the recommendation to always have a carbon monoxide alarm with you when you're staying at a hotel or an Airbnb?
It's funny, the more you know, the more you change your behavior. Yeah, I would recommend it. Airbnbs are awesome. I actually took my son up to a trip in Canada. We stayed at a bunch of them. But not knowing how regularly they check their CO meters and seeing how many people have passed away in a rental property because it wasn't metered appropriately is enough for me to, I bring my own. It's easy. Same with hotels. You see it happen all the time. People can pass away. It seems excessive. Before I got on the fire service, I would say checking for bed bugs was excessive. I do that now every time I go to a hotel. I don't want to bring that home with me either. Anything that can have long-term effects, just checking for the hazard is the best way to keep yourself safe from that hazard. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So do what you can.
So, Mike, before we get to final thoughts, you mentioned earlier that you were teaching at Whammer. Why don't you tell some of our firefighter friends out there what is Whammer and when is their conference?
Sounds good, Kenny. Thanks for bringing it back up. Yeah. So Whammer is the Wisconsin Association of Hazardous Material Responders. Okay. Every firefighter in the state of Wisconsin needs to be trained to the hazmat ops level, which means that every firefighter in the state of Wisconsin can benefit from going to Whammer. You can learn a lot from experts in the field, whether that be about metering, how to run a hazmat team, new emerging hazards. The FBI does their hazard awareness classes as well. It's a great time to just get people together, pool resources, and know who you're going to call when an emergency happens in your community.
So our firefighters that are looking for the Whammer conference, how can they go about finding it?
Yeah, so you just go to wahmr.com, whammer.com, and you can find out all the information about the 2026 Whammer Conference, which will be held March 4th and 5th in lovely Stevens Point. They like to hold it there because there's nothing to do besides the Whammer Conference in Stevens Point on March 4th and 5th. So you're going to have a great time. You'll meet a lot of people in the know. And then the next time you have an emergency in your community, when you call up, you'll actually have a face they can put to who's going to be responding, what the questions they're going to ask, and you'll feel better about those challenges that you can encounter.
So, Mike, I'd like to thank you for being on this installment of the Fireman Kenny Show podcast. So do you have any final thoughts for our 12 loyal listeners?
I do, Kenny. Yeah, just remember, carbon monoxide has no smell, has no taste, has no color, making it truly a colorless, odorless, poisonous gas. That's why it's been dubbed the invisible killer. You can't see the invisible killer unless you have a meter to look for it. Make sure you check your CO detectors monthly. Make sure you replace them every 5 to 7 years. And again, just practice good safety when it comes to using anything that can produce carbon monoxide. Any kind of combustion process, whether that's your gas stove, gas water heater, a generator. Make sure they're serviced properly. Make sure you keep the generator away from the house at least 20 feet.
We would like to thank Captain Mike Thurow for the interview on carbon monoxide awareness. For more information on the dangers of carbon monoxide, you can visit ncoaa.us. Be sure to tune into the next episode when we talk with an interesting person who has interesting things to say about an interesting topic. WPLG 715, Fireman Kenny is returning to quarters.
Working together with first responders throughout Southeast Wisconsin, you can help keep our community safe. They answer the call to be there for you whenever needed. Fire Suppression Solutions proudly salutes our first responders. Here's another important message from the Milwaukee Media Group.
I'm Community Outreach Specialist Cody Zhang with the Wauwatosa Fire Department. Carbon monoxide poisonings cause over 400 deaths and over 50,000 emergency room visits each year. During Carbon Monoxide Awareness Month, be sure to install carbon monoxide alarms on each level of your home. Have fuel-burning appliances such as furnaces, clothes dryers, and water heaters, as well as chimneys and vents inspected each year by a qualified professional. And finally, never leave a car running in the garage, even if the garage door is open.
The Milwaukee Media Group and Fire Suppression Solutions are proud to salute our first responders. Get more information and links to first responders throughout Southeast Wisconsin online now at milwaukeemediagroup.com.